Who's got it better than us? Welcome to He's a Giant, a pod about the John Harbaugh era of New York Giants football. I am your host, Sal, with my co-host, Monty. What's going on, man?
Good life, man. We finally got our coach. All these fucking peasants around the league are still trying to find out who their coach is. Was it 7 of them now? We have the best one of the bunch. He came in here, dropped his nuts on the table, got control of all football operations. Finally feels like a turning point for the New York Giants organization. And most importantly, our friend Chris Rossetti kept his job. So congrats, Chris.
No reason to get rid of the finest scout there is in the NFL, Chris Rossetti. Keep that man employed. So, quick recap. We guys have all been through it, but last week we ended our episode, our final prospect review and our QB episode, not knowing the fate of the Giants' John Harbaugh search. It was the day that he came to New York, and we weren't sure if a deal was going to get done. And I think within about 20 minutes of us closing out our show, we hopped on a space, and I hear Monty jump in and he screams, and I quote, "Harbaugh's a giant! Harbaugh's a giant!" And exactly those words.
Exactly what happened. I saw it pop up on my phone right as I was about to open the space, and I go and I open it. I'm like, they're not talking about this yet. Guys, Harbaugh's a giant.
Harbaugh's a giant. Of course, you guys know about all the drama that followed with the contract signing coming down to the wire on Saturday. Let's talk a little bit about that. He agrees to sign.
Cancels meeting with Tennessee.
Cancels the Thursday meeting where Tennessee is going to fly to him. We're celebrating all day Thursday. We're celebrating on Friday. And then we're starting to hear rumblings on Friday like, hey, wait a minute, this is not done yet. The contract still hasn't been worked out. There are some contractual issues in writing that have to be fixed. Ultimately, it does get agreed upon, kind of pushing the self-assigned deadline of Saturday at about 1 p.m. Wanted to get that done well before the 4:30 game. So let's talk about what happened. We heard a lot of rumblings, but give me your assessment of what you think was the holdup, what you really think what was the holdup, not what was necessarily just reported, and what went down.
First, before I get into it, I just want to, congratulate all the people who are on it, because I remember last chat, I was like, I don't know if I'm a source guy anymore. We don't know. All this stuff's happened. So congrats, Anthony Betts, our guy. Congrats, Ricky, our guy, and everybody else who had that Harbaugh was a giant all along. Great work, guys. But yeah, man, I mean, regardless of that, there's a lot, despite all of that kind of being right and it being announced that he is the future, trending to be the future head coach in the New York Giants. It seemed to be a lot of things that got caught up. I think a lot of that just comes with the Giants have been doing things a certain way for a long time in a lot of ways. From just the operation standpoint, where as far as just the head coach reporting to the owner, I'm sure there was some part of that, but I don't think that was what they fought about for 2 days. I think it was more that John Harbaugh wanted to get everything in writing that he was going to have control of the entire organization. And that meant he was in control of the fate of anybody in that organization. That comes down to people who have been here forever, a guy like Kevin Abrams, if he so pleases, or even moving around people in ownership. I think he has all that power now. And when I say people in ownership, I mean like Tim McDonald, not actually touching the board of directors or anything like that, but people who work within the football operations.
I think that was fundamentally the point, whether it is Joe Schoen, Tim McDonald, but it was, really doing what you and I were advocating Harbaugh for in the beginning. For like the reason we wanted John Harbaugh here was because we thought that he would bring with him the gravitas to implement tremendous infrastructural change in how this organization is run, that he would not be okay with the status quo that the Giants have, that he would probably want to at some point bring his own GM, that he'd want to bring his own personnel people, but that he'd want to change the structure of how decisions are made in that building. And that's exactly what he did. And yeah, Joe Schoen is still here as GM for now. We don't know how long that'll be. Paul Schwartz put out an article that they would expect to try to work out an extension after the draft. but it's not being done right now. Joe Schoen dodged that question himself at the press conference the other day. But by all accounts, they seem to have a perfectly reasonable working relationship for now, Harbaugh and Schoen. We'll see where it goes. But the big thing here is John Harbaugh has just wrestled personnel control away from other people in that building. And I think most football operations go away from people. Now, that's not to say he's making every personnel decision. He's a coach. But, I do think that he is creating the culture of who's going to be in personnel and how they'll operate.
Yeah. I wanted to address one of the comments here because I did want to touch on this at some point because, there is an idea now. We'll see what happens with Joe Schoen. But to me, I was unhappy with the reporting when it initially come out that basically there's all this like, oh, he's going to be fine. He's going to keep Joe Schoen. And what that comes down to is I don't have a trust for Giants ownership. I don't trust the messaging that's coming out and to believe what they're going to say. And if it was going to come in here, everything was going to say status quo, including the GM. That's not why I wanted John Harbaugh. I didn't want John Harbaugh to come in here and conform his way to the Giants' way. I did not expect that this would go beyond a Shane. A lot of things that I knew he would have power over, reforming the front office, one of them, it seems like it's going a lot further than just the front office, where he is going to rebuild this organization from the bottom up. And I thought, to me, not getting Shane out of here was just the start of him not demanding the control that he really needs to fix the Giants. And by all accounts, that is not the case. So although I hope he ultimately does bring in his own GM eventually, and we'll see what happens to the extension. I think some idea this is a trial period for Joe Schoen and see how they work together. And we'll see if an extension comes after. It more comes down to the big picture of, does he have the power to do what he needs to do?
Yeah, I think this definitely goes beyond Joe Schoen. And I think the big issue, it's a valid question. But the real issue here is I don't think Joe Schoen is all that relevant anymore. Yes, he's the GM. He's going to have a big role in a lot of personnel process. But this is not Joe Schoen's show anymore. He basically works for the infrastructure that John Harbaugh is going to create. And I think that matters way more than who specifically is retained or not retained in the building. I think, the big like quiet part that's not being discussed in all of this by anybody in the media and by most people who are content creators or whatnot discussing the Giants is that there is an implication here, at least, that the involvement of family in personnel decision making was one of the hang-up issues, because at face value, it's very hard to believe that the singular issue of John Harbaugh saying, I want to report directly to John Mara and ownership and not to Joe Schoen, was the biggest cause of all of this consternation. There's no way I believe that caused the delay and hand-wringing. Only family could have done that.
Could you imagine what like John Harbaugh would think if like that was his big demand and they're like, I don't know, John, we're gonna have to fight about this for 3 days. You'd probably just be like, I'm getting the fuck out of here if that's what we're hanging up on.
No way, no chance of that. And so, I mean, I think it's more about how, and I don't know the details, obviously, but I think I would guess that it's more about how does family structure into this, right? What happens with family? People who are involved in personnel like McDonald, something he has not had in all his years in Baltimore. Steve Bisciotti, for all his recent exploits, largely stays out of the business of football. It was handled by John Harbaugh and guys like Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome. Family was not involved. So I believe that's part of this. We'll find out. I think we're going to see if people get shuffled around on the Giants website in terms of their roles over time. But let's just say I have a lot of faith that John Harbaugh is going to do this correctly, and he's going to put the Giants in a proper place on how decisions should be made.
Yeah, no, I mean, whether it's Tim McDonald or whoever, there's family who I do expect, and we'll see what happens there. There'll be some changes, but there's also people that are like family to this, and guys who have been around for a long, long time, who have just been a country club here and just hung on, and I think a lot of that's coming to the end.
we should discuss the hero of the story here, Chris Mara. Chris Mara, who we have toasted on this, we've roasted on this pod a couple of times, along with members of his family. Give that man his just due. Chris Mara stepped up, apparently in a much more prominent role in ownership with John's health, dealing with cancer. But now it's well reported. Chris Mara is the one who pushed for the Baltimore guys in the past. Chris Mara is the one who was ready to pounce on John Harbaugh if he were to become available. He had his research done. And the second he became available, apparently instructed the general manager, Joe Schoen, to get on the phone with Harbaugh's agent. And he called him 3 times in the first hour after Harbaugh was fired by the Ravens. Chris Mara himself reached out through Tom Coughlin to set up a talk and a meeting with John Harbaugh. Coughlin encouraged it. Coughlin helped the process. God bless you, Coach Coughlin. And Chris Mara drives down last Sunday. I can't believe, it's a whirlwind. 2 Sundays ago. No, it was last Sunday, actually. My God, it moved fast. Drives to Baltimore to meet Harbaugh at his home in the Baltimore suburbs, has lunch with him, has cookies with his wife, all this stuff, but basically talks about the Giants, talks about the prospects of him coming. And apparently, as he's driving back, he calls John Mara and Steve Tisch and says, this guy wants to be a Giant. And it was Chris Mara who got this rolling. It was Chris Mara that pushed it and that got John Harbaugh to be really invested in the Giants. And apparently it was Chris Mara and another secret dinner, not just the dinner on last Wednesday night where they met at the famous Mediterranean restaurant, but it was Chris Mara who met with them again on Friday night, somewhere between New York and Maryland, presumably in Delaware, for another private dinner with John Harbaugh, and essentially sealed the deal on whatever issues there were in the contract. So give Chris Mara all his due. That man is the one who delivered John Harbaugh to the Giants.
Yeah, man. First and foremost, credit to Chris Mara for all the things you said, but credit to all the big heads involved in this, even to lesser levels. Shout out to John Mara in his health, being able to be there and make a pitch. Chris credited him with making the final pitch. Shout out to Steve Tisch breaking out the jet, breaking out his money to, he is the guy who funds these operations. We are funding a lot of money for John Harbaugh. So shout out Steve Tisch for putting his money to fix this organization. Shout out Joe Schoen for his role and was described as relentless in bringing in John Harbaugh. And shout out to all the former Giants and people connected who gave us help. Shout out Tom Coughlin, as you mentioned. Shout out Brian Dable, who had every reason to, hold a grudge for us and tell us to fuck off. Gave John Harbaugh a recommendation to come to the Giants. So, I really appreciate that from him. I hope for giving us Jackson Dart and for, going that far that he gets that job in Buffalo. No, I have no qualms with Brian Dable, and we're on to better days.
Yep. All right. You want to talk about what it means to have John Harbaugh here? Let's get into that, because we want to go over more than just the joy of having him here with you guys. We want to discuss what a Harbaugh coaching world looks like. We talked about how personnel might change, and I think time will tell on that front. But what does it mean to have John Harbaugh as coach? What did you learn from studying him more, from listening to him at his press conference? What do you think he's bringing to this organization?
Obviously, the first thing what we talked about, I think he's bringing organizational change, and it's something I've talked about on the show for a long time. It's something I've talked about on Twitter for a long time. I have a lot of respect for the Baltimore Ravens organization and how they run things, and I think that the way they run things is going to become the Giants' way. The way that they take advantage of comp picks, the way that they trade down, the way that they trade for expiring players so they can then take advantage of comp picks. The way they move contracts around, they do a positional value, taking best player available. They do all those things at a phenomenal level. And John Harbaugh is a huge part of that draft process, and he's going to continue to be and help build it out here. As from a coaching standpoint, guy is a phenomenal staff builder. He's been doing it for 18 years, consistently bringing in some of the best staffs in the NFL. We'll get into some of the coordinators that they're talking about bringing in here, but what has been rumored, I am ecstatic about hearing, and we'll talk about that. And a guy who just, he brings an accountability we haven't had here. He brings a culture. He brings a CEO. He brings a guy who's develops talent, a guy who doesn't focus on one side of the ball or one position, a guy who gets his hands all over the place and where they're needed, and nothing gets neglected. I think John Harbaugh is a phenomenal coach. You could argue there's better coaches that maybe even, Giants had a shot at, and we'll see how these guys end up being. But he's the exact type of coach we need. He's a good coach, and he's an experienced coach that can get this organization steered in the right direction and will have the power to do that.
Yep. I want to get into a little bit of what he does that makes an impact, because I think when you want a CEO head coach, which is what they got, it comes with a different approach than what we're used to. Before I get into that, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. And I've just got to remind all you guys, if you get a chance, please hit the like button on the episode. That helps us grow. Please subscribe if you have not subscribed already to He's a Giant, and keep pushing us into a higher level of viewers and working with that YouTube algorithm. So thank you guys for being here. So the CEO head coach that is John Harbaugh. I've spent a lot of time listening to, Baltimore Ravens people like Ken McCusick from Film Study Ravens and other reporters in Baltimore talk about his specific way of coaching. And the themes that are consistent are, number one, he's very much a player's coach, in the sense that I think he wants his players to succeed, and he brings a very positive attitude with him to try to motivate them. But he is not in any way a pushover. He's very much a disciplinarian. He's the kind of guy that is going to have high demands of his players and expects them all to come to work on time, be in the weight room early. He's apparently in the weight room by 6 a.m. every day, lifting. He expected his players to be in the weight room by 6 a.m. lifting with him. He expects them at the meetings on time. He expects them to take their responsibilities off the field very seriously. This must sound familiar to you guys. This is Tom Coughlin-esque, all of this stuff, right? He works on Coughlin time. In terms of specifics in how he tries to get the most out of his players, he is a delegator. He's not an X's and O's guy. He's a guy, well, not just an X's and O's guy. He picks coaches carefully. He doesn't just go with guys he's comfortable with. He has a tendency to select coordinators and coaches that he thinks best fit the personnel on the team to maximize what he can get out of them. Then he delegates. He wants those coaches to be his delegates, to work with each position group, each unit. And the way they run practices is really fascinating, Monty. Apparently, the way John Harbaugh structures his practices is every position group coach, every coordinator is tasked with getting all of the players on the team ready day by day by having them do individual drills in their groups. And each player, every day of practice, will get graded on how they practice. Did you show up on time? Did you know your assignment? How did you block? How did you run a route? Did you make a tackle? Were you in position correctly? They get graded, whatever it may be, they get graded daily. And there's a structured grading system, kind of like we do our grading scale for prospects. Every single player by position group gets graded and scored daily. The coaches then hang up a list, a chart, showing how each person is performing every single day in the position group room. So if you're in the tight end room and there's essentially a grading score up there for all the tight ends, you will see how you're scoring as a blocker, as a route runner, in run blocking, pass blocking. And apparently, it's a pretty motivating thing. You see yourself up there. You don't want to be the last guy on that list. You want to compete every day. Not only does this create internal competition, but I think it's actually a way for guys to earn playing time. They fight for that spot on Sunday. They work their asses off throughout the week. Apparently, John Harbaugh is known for having amongst the toughest, if not the toughest, practice schedule of anybody in the NFL. He's right up there with Kyle Shanahan. He works his guys. But then on Sunday, they're very much prepared. So give me your thoughts on that versus what we've been used to.
I mean, that's great to hear. There has definitely been especially under Brian Daboll, feels like it's been a lack of accountability. He was a very, very player-friendly coach. People talked about the country club-esque training camp he had and all those type of things. And I think there's obviously some benefits of it, to have a player's coach, but there's ways to do both, to be able to hold your players accountable, but also have a good relationship with your players. And I think that John Harbaugh has learned that balance over his 18 years as a head coach. And, I like you said, it reminds me a lot of Coughlin.
It's interesting. I don't want to get too distracted. Yeah, go ahead. You hit it.
Kevin Abrams has been fired. It was what we were just talking about, the type of control that John Harbaugh has to touch guys that were once untouchable. Kevin Abrams, longtime Giants front office member, has been fired.
Okay. Guess what just happened? The senior VP of football operations and strategy position is now open.
Mm-hmm.
For somebody. Kevin Abrams that guy survived everything since Coughlin, I think, right? Before Coughlin, I think, right? He's been here since, I think, Jim Fossil.
He was the Giants' future GM at one point in time.
Right. He's out. That means somebody's coming in. We'll see who. Does that mean Joe Schoen gets slid over to that role and maybe Chad Alexander gets hired? I don't know. More to come, but that's a big impact move. Going back to the coaching stuff, and I know I appreciate you guys posting in the chat. There's news on the defensive front too. All the defensive coaches have been essentially told they're out, except for maybe Charlie Bullen. He's the only one that has a chance to stay, which doesn't surprise.
Makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, basically all of them are gone. Charlie Bullen probably. We'll see if he gets a DC job. Also makes sense. We'll get into it, but a name like Jim Leonhard thrown around, Charlie Bullen.
Yeah. Well timed, because guess what, guys? We're prepared to talk about them today. We are always right on the money. Anyway, the country club stuff is gone. I think a hard practice schedule is in. A detail-oriented, structured practice schedule is in. No more watching our guys just look lost on Sundays, my guess, right? I think our guys are not going to lose games because they look ill-prepared. We're not going to lose games because they weren't coached up properly. They're going to get coached to the ground. And the guys who can do it will stay. And the guys who can't keep up, he is going to get rid of. They're not going to play. And I can't wait to see that kind of accountability back in this organization. Because the one thing you could say about Coughlin's teams, when they hit, right, when they got to the playoffs, they were dangerous. And the reason they were dangerous is because they were largely playing mistake-free football. Everybody, from Eli down, that's just a well-coached team. It's a team where everybody knows their assignment, knows their role. The depth guys come in, they know how to fill in for the guy who's the starter who got hurt. That's the kind of team we're looking for. So I think that's one of the biggest things in Harbaugh that I'm looking to see him implement. Finding his delegates and really just grading those practices and working these guys into the ground. I think we're going to hear about it in OTAs. I think we're going to hear about it in training camp. I think we're going to see it in the spring. Like, guys are getting worked a lot harder. That country club stuff is over.
Mm-hmm.
You're smiling about something.
I just can't get over the fact that this organization is changing. I know we're talking about one thing, but I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking, like, man, that is the first sign this is real, that Harbaugh got the power that he needed to make change in this organization. It's a good feeling.
Well, all right. Well, if you want to talk about that, we can shift over to that.
I'm just happy.
No, it's fine. There's the news is breaking in real time, so we can talk about it. But I think, what is there to say? I think the bottom line is he's making changes. I don't know who lands where, but he's making changes in the infrastructure of the building, which I think is what we've all wanted. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Kevin Abrams is good at his job or not. I just know the results have not been good. So yeah, we'll see.
It's just a sign that big things are coming, that the people who were previously protected are no longer the protected class.
Yeah. Again, I don't know the roles these guys are going to have, whether it's Shane, McDonald, or whoever. I have no idea how they're going to fit in this. All I know is the change is coming, right? And I think that's what we want to see. All right. So that's what Harbaugh brings, I think, as a coach on, when it comes to preparation, delegation. What does what do you think he brings in terms of game day management? Because that's a fair place to start talking about the pros and the cons.
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one spot to start with this is, the stat that's been thrown around plenty is, the 18 double digit leads in the second half over his time in Baltimore. I do think that stat is pretty misleading, though. It's not that it's not valid. There is some valid aspects of it. Certainly he has blown leads more than you would like to see, but I think it's worth remembering that he's been coaching for 18 years in Baltimore, so it's one per season. I don't think that's some crazy stat to have. I also think that the reason that this happens to Harbaugh is because they are such a good team from a point differential standpoint throughout his entire tenure there. He's been one of the top point differential teams, and that what goes along with that is having a lot of double-digit leads. And the more double-digit lead you have, the more likely you are to blow it. I certainly think there is some reasons he blew it. Clock management has been an issue, things along those lines, and I think those are worth mentioning. But I think that is, that's the main thing that people are talking about as far as the negative for game days with Harbaugh.
I think it's a fair criticism. I think Ravens fans, I'm not a huge believer in a lot of the anger they have towards that man. I'm not going to try to pretend that I'm them, but at the same time, I think where they have some valid concerns is we blew some games we should have won, a lot of games, and they felt that there was management, there were management issues in terms of clock management, decision making, whatnot. At the end of the day, that kind of stuff falls on the head coach, so he has to bear the brunt of those failures. So I want to see what has he learned. He's not incapable of learning, being the seasoned head coach. What did you learn from your mistakes in clock management? What did you learn from your mistakes in terms of game management? One of the things I came across was that one thing that I think he struggled with was that as good as the Ravens offense was with Todd Monken, who we'll get to in a minute, one of the problems of that offense was it was so explosive and so quick to score that they ran some of the fewest plays in the NFL on offense. And they were able to put up points doing that because they were explosive. But they didn't eat any time off the clock. And their defensive players were gassed. Like they were always on the field because the offense would come in and score quickly and then get off the field. And that led to guys breaking down towards the end of games. And I think that when they were more balanced in the past, where they had, some mixture of longer drives, more emphasis on running, that they were better. So these are things that I hope he learns, especially if he's bringing Todd Monken with him, which I believe he is. I want to see him adapt in those things. And it's a fair criticism to say, you've got to know how to manage a game better to finish with the win. So, I mean, not that he doesn't win enough, but those are key features of winning, especially in big games like in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the other aspect of this is, there's obviously the part that we commended him on in the sense of like, he's a guy who's going to have his hands all over the team. He hires a great staff, all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, this isn't a guy who just, takes over and takes control of a side of the ball and be like, hey, big game. This is my legacy game. I'm going to shut down this offense, or I'm going to run all over this defense that's been shut down this year. That's not Harbaugh. He's, he'll help. He's going to get into the game plans with the offensive and defensive coach, but you're not getting the schematic mastermind on either side of the ball. Harbaugh is what you lose. And when you do find that, you run into a situation like Mike McDonald, where he goes on and gets a head coaching job. So, that's the downside with, having a guy like Harbaugh. But, I guess on the other side of that, though, I'll say I've brought this up before, is if something grows tired, as something has been working in the past, but the NFL figures out, the NFL adjusts. An example of that, you could see a couple of recent ones. You could talk about Wink Martindale, where he had a top 5 defense for them for years, and it started not work as well, and then they went and got Mike McDonald. You could talk about Greg Roman, who they had an MVP year with Lamar Jackson. They had a great running game, but Lamar Jackson outgrew him. He could do more of the passer, and he was letting him do. So he brings in Todd Monken. those are also, I mean, that's the flip side of it, though. You're not married to a scheme, which is a nice thing.
Let me read the quote that I think is worth discussing that you're talking about here. Which the point you're raising is Harbaugh is very flexible when it comes to scheme and coaches. He adapts. But what he's consistent on are his football principles. And this is his quote from a question he got yesterday, basically asking about how you had a vision 18 years ago. Do you have the same vision? What have you learned? And this was his exact quote from John Harbaugh. You learn a lot, and one of those things is this. There are principles, right? And the principles of the vision you're talking about, that's the word, are written in stone, and they are football principles. They're self-evident truths. They aren't ever going to change. Those are things you carry with you through 18 years or 42 years or whatever it is. You carry those principles with you. You learn what they are, and they're just non-compromised. They can't be. They have to happen. The methods, those things are like drawn in the dirt. You're drawing up a play. Come on, guys. Here's what we're going to do. You draw it in the dirt. You've got to keep those things moving. Play calls, defensive schemes, blitz patterns, how you lift weights, how you train, whatever, how you practice. Practices have changed a lot. Haven't they over the years? They've changed a ton. So all those things are all going to change as we go. So those things in 18 years and 40-some years, they've all evolved and changed and grown. And they will continue to change every single day. Understand those two things, principles and methods. You're going to try to merge them the best you can to try to win the next game. Keep it simple. Try to win the next game. And that's what we'll try to do. I love that. I mean, that answer is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, phenomenal football mind. You just love to hear this guy speak because he knows football.
So we talked about John Harbaugh himself, his impact on the organization. We're seeing it tonight with the Kevin Abrams ousting. Joe Schoen, I hope you enjoy Kevin Abrams' office. John Harbaugh, one of the best qualities about him is that he has consistently developed and brought in good coaches to work with him. He is a CEO. He hires the right managers underneath him to run his football team. So we are going to talk about some of the prospective candidates for coordinators and touch on position groups a little bit. Let's start on the easy side of this, the offensive side. Todd Monken, I mean, he himself said, I think it might be Monken who's coming here. I mean, he probably shouldn't have said that with the Rooney Rule stuff.
Yeah.
But Todd Monken has been the Baltimore offensive coordinator from 2023 through now for the last 3 years. He was brought in to replace Greg Roman, and immediately that offense took off. I think they were like the number one offense in the NFL in terms of points per game in 2024. I think they were number 2 or 3 in 2023. Monty, can you tell everybody what you've learned and what you know about what to expect from the Todd Monken offense, assuming he is the offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I mean, Todd Monken is a very interesting hire when he was brought into the NFL because he started off in college. This is a guy who was, at one point at Oklahoma State, with Brandon Weeden, and he was running that air raid offense there. He was over with Jameis Winston in Tampa Bay. We're there. And hey, now he's here now to help mentor Jackson Dart, but again, just hucking it downfield. That's kind of what he's done. He had this air raid offense, but over time he's evolved it. He, really started in Georgia when he went there, and they really started to run more of a pro style vertical offense where they had a lot of heavy stats. You had 2 to 3 tight ends on the field consistently. At Georgia, they had some great tight ends there. That was Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington and whatnot. And then he took it to the Ravens. And the Ravens, again, heavy tight end team. They run their heavy sets. Tight end's important to that offense. They want to be able to confuse you by being in heavy all the time because they don't be confused. They are a heavy pass team. They will pass more than they run. But if you're going to run nickel and you're going to go out there and put little guys, they can just run it down your throat. So you kind of have to make a choice there, which is a really interesting part about it. But I think what's fantastic about this offense for Jackson Dart is that's what Jackson Dart comes from. Jackson Dart is an air raid guy. He comes from Lane Kiffin. You saw some of those principles that Brian Dable put into the offense last year that made Jackson Dart comfortable. But ultimately, this guy needs to evolve to a pro style offense. And I think that Todd Monken will be a great way to intro him to more of a pro style offense while keeping the things that he's comfortable with. So, Jackson Dart's not quite as good as Lamar Jackson. That's clear. He's not an MVP. He's not the athlete Lamar Jackson is, but he's the guy who can run football. It's a guy who can do a lot of things that Todd Monken wants to do. He's a guy who can take shots downfield. I think this is going to be a great fit for Jackson Dart. What are your thoughts?
I mean, you know very well that my personal preference in a vacuum is more the horizontal West Coast style offense, or the modern versions of it, the McDaniels, the Shanahans, McVays, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feed off outside zone runs, use all sorts of varied personnel groupings, including bunch, and build a horizontal pass game and create a lot of conflicts that way. But, I do, what I really like about studying the Monken offense is, one, as you mentioned, it is geared towards the type of athlete and playmaker that Jackson Dart is, because it takes advantage of both the ability to drive the ball down the field, as well as his ability to use every blade of grass. That's one of those key terms you're going to hear a lot from Monken: make the defense and defend every blade of grass, and use his legs. He does not discourage his quarterbacks from using his legs. He doesn't want them standing as a statue and just running a timing offense. He wants them to make plays. He wants them to be explosive. And when the defense gives them lanes to run, he's very comfortable teaching them, take it. Take the big explosive play. Take that big run. Because as many people who are into football analytics know, the quarterback scramble is the most efficient play in football. It is by far the most efficient play in football. So he doesn't stop a quarterback from doing those things. He allows QBs to make checks at the line. He pushes the ball down the field. He creates route concepts that stretch out defenses. He likes to stretch them out so that they're trying to cover everything to create throwing lanes for his quarterback. He wants them to look for explosive plays. It's kind of a, high to low, if you want to think of it that way. But it's a big play down to short to small play kind of approach to running a defense and progressions. But at the end of the day, it allows a guy like Jackson Dart to do what he wants to do. Jackson Dart, at his heart, is a playmaker. He wants to make plays constantly, and it feeds into that. So I'm kind of excited about that. From a run game perspective, this is where I think the heavy personnel helps. He does rely a lot on tight ends and big receivers, because not only are they targets, but they're also part of the run game. I mean, he doesn't just block with 5 linemen. He wants guys who are going to be able to get to the second level as receivers and create run blocking lanes. Runs a lot of outside zone, runs a lot of inside zone, but he also wants guys to actually be blockers up and down the field. So, it's hard to know exactly how that's going to shake out, because I think with Derrick Henry, it's a little bit different. I think you cater your run game to Derrick Henry, where you want him running more inside zone and just destroying the defense. What's he going to do with Cam Scatterwood? There's a little bit of that in Cam Scatterwood, but he's not quite the player, right? How is he going to design it? What kind of players are they going to go after? I think the run scheme is going to be important. The offensive line is really important here, because if he's going to run the type of offense he wants to run, I just think they need bigger bodies on the offensive line than they currently have, right? Yeah. And I think that is going to be a point of emphasis, that they want larger human beings specifically for pass blocking. So I'm curious where he goes with this. I'm curious how they handle the offensive line. Speaking of offensive coaches, I do think Carmen Brasillo is likely to be retained from what we're hearing. John Harbaugh's daughter, basically told him he'd be out of his mind to get rid of Brasillo, which pretty much means I think that he's going to listen to his dad, and he's probably going to keep Brasillo. But how are they going to coach this up? I mean, that's kind of the big thing. Who are they looking for personnel-wise? What is their run scheme going to be? I'm very curious in how they handle that. But big picture here, I think Monken matches what, at his heart, Jackson Dart wants to be and what he is. He's a playmaker quarterback, and he wants to exploit that. And as you mentioned, he's 59 years old now. If he doesn't get that Cleveland job, and apparently he's out for the Cleveland job, and he takes the Giants job, he's going to be our OC for years to come. You almost never have to worry about him getting a head coaching job, which is great for Jackson Dart if he's the guy.
Yeah, I mean that's the fantastic part. I mean, you never know. You can never say never. Say it could always happen, or it'll always be that one team that's interested, like the Browns were at least for a little bit this year. If he's doing a great job, especially when it's with a guy like Jackson Dart and not a guy like Lamar Jackson, we'll see what type of interest he had. But I mean, it's a great point because this isn't Mike McDaniel, where it'd be awesome having Mike McDaniel for a year, maybe two, but you're not going to have him much longer than that. While this guy can really be with Dart for the rest of his career for as long as we want to have him. That's a real possibility. So yeah, I think that part's awesome. And I think, another great thing about this, I alluded to it earlier, but another great thing about the Todd Monken offense is I think there's something in the NFL to just, zig when other people are zagging and whatnot. And the NFL is just getting so small. Everybody's running sub packages. Nobody runs their base defense anymore more than like a little bit of the time. And being able to get big, put big bodies on the field, I think that's a way to zig when others are zagging and vice versa, because I think that's how you could really just dominate the personnel you're going against.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's going to be something that is a good fit here. Like Alex is pointing out, he just makes sense for what we're trying to do here with Dart. So I like it. As an aside for Jackson Dart, one of the things I noticed, we criticized him when he came out. I think we definitely underestimated the playmaking ability and but really what we didn't know about him was the human being that he is and the kind of like the competitor that he is and the personality, because that's what really is the driving force behind why he's been so good this year.
We saw him cry in Joe Judge's lap and we're like, this isn't a guy.
I gotta be honest, that really turned me off. But he's a competitor. And I think that if you want to be fair in criticism of Jackson Dart and critique, and we're always going to own up to what we've said, and we're going to be fair, both good and bad. He still has some of those flaws with his footwork that we saw in college. Like he has rushed feet. He throws off his back foot a lot. He just doesn't set. He doesn't take advantage of what I think is a lot more untapped physical potential, right? I think especially when he's got a clean pocket and he's got the ability to just sit there, set his feet, use his torque and unleash the ball. He still has a tendency to just kind of drift backwards, throw off his back foot, and he loses juice on that football. I really hope he spends this offseason really fixing that stuff. That's something that Josh Allen, worked on and fixed. A lot of quarterbacks have been able to tap into strength doing that. And I think there's a lot more juice there if he works on it. So I hope he's doing that right now.
Yeah, that'd be big for him because there's so many things that impressed me about him. I mean, I thought he was phenomenal navigating the pocket this year. He was so good at just so agile. He had such good feel for the pass rush. And that's just like his athleticism and his playmaking ability aside. He just really, really has the ability to work from the pocket once he kind of gets his footwork down better.
Absolutely. All right. So I don't really want to go over the other guys on offense because I don't think they're even options at this point. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think we can assume it's going to be Todd Monken until it's not type of thing.
Okay. So you want to hop into, I think there's three guys on defense I want to discuss. And I think we discussed them a little bit before the show, just got into it a little bit, but I think they're worth discussing as potential defensive coordinator candidates. All very unique and interesting candidates. There's a couple of guys we're not going to discuss that I think are still candidates. I'll just name them quickly. Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator for the Ravens the last couple of years. Previous, I think he was a linebackers coach. He struggled a little bit, as a defensive coordinator. I don't think he's going to be in the running for the DC job here, but he's a name to keep an eye on. The other candidate we're not discussing is Jannard Wilson, who was with the Eagles and the Ravens. The Giants tried to get him to be our DC. Ultimately hired Shane Bowen because he took the job in Tennessee. It did not look good in Tennessee, but is that him or personnel? I'm not sure. But I'm just, for the sake of time, let's not go through those two, but let's go through three other guys, starting with the guy that we both think would be the perfect fit. And I'll let you handle this because you love this guy and you've been linking him to Harbaugh even before Harbaugh was a Giant. So why don't you go through number one here?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing about Harbaugh, and you're going to notice this theme, at least with a couple of guys we're talking about here. He has gone away from his tree on offense, but on defense, I think he has a lot of belief in, the way his defense does things. They'll evolve, take it new directions, but it's always been from the relative Ravens tree and trying to find connections that made sense there, for exciting guys. I was looking around and trying to see, and one guy popped up, and I was like, okay, not a direct connection, but there is one, and that's Jim Leonhard, who played underneath John Harbaugh, his first year coaching. Then Ryan, his first defensive coordinator, also coached with them at Cincinnati. And, he took a lot of those principles after he, retired from the NFL and took his first coaching position. And his time at Wisconsin, his alma mater, he went there and created one of the best defenses in college football. I mean, a defense that just wreaked havoc. He made things muddy and made things chaotic. And there's some good videos out there on his defense. If you guys want to watch it, just look up like Jim Leonhard scheme. There's one with Urban Meyer that was really good. And essentially, the idea of his defense is he runs a lot more of a base set than you see typically now. So we'll see if that changes in the NFL. But a lot of a base 3-4, and he not necessarily is a heavy blitzer. He blitzes a little bit, but that's not exactly what he does. But what he more does is he makes it so you can't cheat the line any certain way because you have no idea where it's coming from. He is going to run more of a zone. So there's going to be none of like the motions to see if you're running man or zone and get an idea what you're in. It's going to just be more that anybody can come. There'll be any four people and they'll be coming down. You have no idea where it's coming from. Other people will be dropping back. I think we have the right guys for that with the guys like Brian Burns and Abdul Carter, who I think can, drop back and play something and do something for you when they're not pass rushing, even though the goal would be to send them the majority of the time. But I think that confusion, it's something that you see from Mike McDonald. He does it a lot. It's something you see from Jesse Minter. He does that a lot. Some of the best minds in football are doing this. And I think that's kind of what makes him phenomenal. And now he spent the last 2 years under Vance Joseph, who is a blitzing guy. He's a guy who does send a lot of people and is, more of a man defense while he's more of his own. So, he's getting an idea of kind of the two sides of the chaotic defense with more of like the muddy it up, cause chaos, don't know where things are coming from, but drop back, play zone, try to get them to make a mistake, and just, hey, we're sending everybody and you better figure it out. And with more the Vance Joseph. And I think that those two combinations is going to make a beautiful defense. And I think he's truly the next great defensive mind in the NFL.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. The word I keep hearing and, reading about him and hearing people discuss his defense is chaos. Mm-hmm. Jim Leonhard causes a lot of chaos, and he does it with a lot of post-snap rotations and the secondary linebackers. He tends to run a base 3-4 defense, but it's often a 5-man front. And there's a lot to the alignment of the defensive linemen that is interesting there. A lot of his defensive line work, and if you guys watch the videos on his defense, it's designed to space out 2-3 techs far enough wide where essentially the nose tackle is locked into a one-on-one with the center. And the whole purpose of it is to pull double teams from the guards into the 3 techs and force the center to take on the nose tackle one-on-one, which, is really good to do if you have a center that can cause problems. A nose tackle that can cause problems. Oh, wait, you have Dexter Lawrence.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is you're going to see a lot of Dexter Lawrence one-on-one just naturally. I think it was Urban Meyer talking about like, we didn't want this to happen, but we couldn't do anything about it with the way they aligned their defensive linemen. And the nose tackle was always going one-on-one against our center. And, it's the fastest path to the quarterback is right through the center. So I think a lot of the front is based on that. And then there's just chaos in the back. So he's really interesting. I think he's one of the whiz kids, wonder guys, like you said, the defensive geniuses to come, and I would love to have him. I suspect he's number one on his list, on Harbaugh's list to be DC. I think that what his availability is will depend to some degree on what happens in Denver. If Vance Joseph gets a head coaching job, no doubt in my mind, Sean Payton will offer the DC job to the assistant head coach there. Is he going to take that job versus coming to the Giants? I don't know, but I would suspect he'd be leaning towards Denver because he lives there already. He knows the team. I don't know what would happen, but I think that would be the biggest threat. If Vance Joseph does not get a job as a head coach and is retained as DC in Denver, then I think the odds of Leonhard freeing up completely and becoming RDC go up substantially. And I do think he ends up RDC in that world.
Yeah. And it just should be interesting how the timing of things happen, where, if the Broncos lose this weekend and, he gets the call from the Giants, hey, we're offering the job. We want you to be the DC. Vance Joseph's kind of jumping into this a little bit late. Are you sitting around saying, all right, well, I kind of want to see if I can get the DC job in Denver? Or are you saying, all right, I'm coming. I want this job. I'm coming. I'm not waiting around to find out.
Yep. All right. Okay. Let me discuss the next guy who's, I think, not. If Jim Leonhard doesn't become our DC, I don't think this guy would be our number one, but I want him to be. And I want to discuss him next. So the guy I'm going to discuss next is Daronte Jones from the Minnesota Vikings. And the Giants, he was the Giants' first request for an interview for a DC job in this. And I assume that came from John Harbaugh. He probably requested him. He is presently the defensive pass game coordinator for the Vikings, has been for the last 3 years, 2 under obviously Brian Flores. He was there before that. He joined Minnesota in 2022 as a D-back coach. So he was there, the year we smoked him in the playoffs. He got better though. In 2021, he was the defensive coordinator at LSU. He was with the Vikings in 2020 as a D-back coach. He was a cornerback coach for a couple of years with the Bengals before that. He was an assistant D-backs coach from 2016 and 2017 with the Dolphins, which is where his Joe Schoen connection comes in, working with guys like Vance Joseph, I believe, at that time. He was in Wisconsin in 2015 as a DB coach. I think, was there some overlap there with Leonhard? What years was Leonhard there?
They just missed each other, I think.
Okay. But what was interesting about him is I found, and I dug up stuff, I found tape of players of his that he coached as an assistant head coach and secondary coach in 2014 in Hawaii. And he was a secondary coach 2012 to 2013 in Hawaii also. And this is what I can tell you that what I learned about Daronte Jones. So from a schematic standpoint, he largely runs something not that different than what Jim Leonhard runs. I think there's a lot of post-snap rotation, of post-snap. The concept is muddy the waters and confuse the quarterback post-snap, create a lot of chaos in the backfield. He runs a lot of match zone principles, but he will do it, a lot of times starting in press man. And it's very confusing how he shows his looks to quarterbacks, and then start and press, guys back off. Then they go into match principles. There's a lot of chaos also in the secondary, but it is all designed around bringing pressure. He does all this specifically so he can bring pressure to the quarterback. A lot of times trying to create, just asymmetric fronts and getting pressure in areas that are not being blocked properly. I think he has talked about learning a lot from Brian Flores in that regard, and the value of bringing pressure and creating a lot of problems to the quarterback by getting there quickly. I've heard players with respect to Flores as a defense talk about how it's kind of easy to play secondary for Flores. And the reason is he's bringing pressure all the time. The quarterback's either getting the ball out quick, in which case it's coming to the flat, or it's a slant or something short, or that quarterback, if you don't get there, he's throwing the go ball. So you either defend the short area or you're defending the go ball, and that's it. And in many ways it works, right? Like, it just keeps it simple. Guys don't have to think too much. Not that different from Wink Martindale, actually. Mm-hmm. I think there are elements to that in his game. But what I really liked about Daronte Jones is listening to what he is as a person, as a coach. So one of his players, who was from Hawaii, was talking about what life was like under Daronte Jones. And he said, and this sounds very similar to John Harbaugh. He's a guy that loved his players, very much all about the human beings that were his players, not just the player on the field, but was concerned about their well-being as humans, how they grew up as men. But he held them to a very high standard, extremely high standard. And he held them to a team standard, meaning if anybody messed up, one person messed up, whether it's in practice, on the field during a game, or something off the field, if even one guy messed up, the entire defense was punished and had to be up by 4 a.m. and on the field by 4 a.m. the next day. And literally, they were up at 4 a.m. almost every day on the field because somebody invariably would screw up until they stopped doing it. And he was all about, you are responsible to your teammates. You have to take care of yourself, conduct yourself a certain way on the field during practice, during the game, and off the field, so that your teammates are not all punished for your behavior. And it created this kind of, very, militaristic type alliance between the players where they were all accountable to each other. He was all about accountability, taking care of your players, showing them that you want to coach them, showing them that you want to develop them, but holding them to strict standards and accountability. I love that stuff because that's something we were missing for years here. So between the schematic, the chaos in the secondary and the X's and O's stuff, the learning under Brian Flores, bringing pressure, and just the type of person you're talking about, I'm very excited about Daronte Jones. I've heard that the Vikings would have considered bringing him back as a DC if Brian Flores didn't stay. It sounds like Brian Flores is likely staying because he signed a contract to be their defensive coordinator, for now, unless he gets a head coaching job. But let's assume that Brian Flores is going nowhere. Daronte Jones, I'm confident, is going to get a DC job somewhere. I would like us to consider him if Jim Leonhard is off the table.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting candidate for sure. I mean, he's less of the known commodity than some of these other guys. Not that Jim Leonhard is like this really well-known commodity, but he's a guy who did it in college for a long time at a really good defense. But, I like the trees he comes from. I like the attacking defenses. I like that he works with Vance Joseph. I like that he's like Brian Flores' right-hand man. I guess my only concern would be, again, going back to the experience, he does have a year DC job, and I want to go look at those numbers, and they weren't inspiring. Spent some time since then. He's worked under Brian Flores, but I mean, he was like bottom 5 in the SEC in like points per game, like bottom 5 in yards in the SEC in points per game. He had a good bit of sacks, but he was pretty low in the country in interceptions and turnovers. So, it's a 1-year sample size, but that wasn't super inspiring to me. But you just hope that he learned a lot from Brian Flores, and by all accounts, Brian Flores has a lot of belief in him. So I do like what you're saying from the person standpoint. Next guy we're going to go over, I think, has a lot of that too, and that'll be an interesting discussion. But certainly is an upside swing here, and if Harbaugh believes in him, I think that says a lot.
Yeah, and again, the theme here is the type of people they are, right? I think these two men that we've discussed so far, and I think the third guy's going to be like that, are ideological matches for what John Harbaugh wants to instill in his players, in terms of how he goes about holding people accountable. And that's important. He's a delegator as a CEO. He's got to find guys who are copacetic in that view on how to develop players. And I think that's something you have to pay attention to how these guys talk and how people talk about them, not just their X's and O's when I think looking at these guys. So I do like that. Criticisms are valid. LSU's defense wasn't great when he was there. I don't think Derek Stingley played that year. I think Cordell Flott was on that team. But valid enough. But I think there's a reason he's a hot candidate right now. I think people respect the mind. What do these guys have in common so far? And I think the third guy will have the same personality, approach to accountability, creating chaos in the secondary, confusing quarterbacks. I think what we'll get into is what kind of players they need, and I think I think we'll get into that after we discuss the last guy. But why don't you go into the last guy and start off, and we'll talk about all of them.
Yeah, so I mean, the last guy we're going to talk about here is Anthony Weaver, who I believe he was a former assistant head coach underneath John Harbaugh, and this is a guy that
he did pass up on for Zach Orr, and maybe something he regretted doing, and is now and went over to play in went over to play want to go to Miami. And he went over to Miami, and the first year he had a lot of success over there. This last year, Miami as a whole didn't have that much success. He and the team kind of were better down the stretch, despite trading away a lot of players. But let's go over some of the numbers his first year there, just because I do think that the signs of him being a good DC were there, despite some of the issues. He was 4th in yards per game in the country, 10th in points per game, 9 EPA per pass, and 13 in EPA per rush. So neither of those really fell or were bad because of that. It's an interesting thing where he is, again, not really he's kind of in the middle from like a blitz standpoint. He is not that heavy in his blitzes. Or no, I was wrong. Sorry. That was like he actually is high. Sorry. He's fifth. He was 5th this year in blitz rate. He was 31%. So he is a very aggressive from a blitz standpoint. So what you're getting from him is that I was watching an interesting video as well today from the QB Collective guys, which that if you don't know QB Collective, they are kind of the like Kyle Shanahan group. All those guys that were in Washington kind of started this together, and they've brought in some defensive guys with him, and he is one of them. He's one of the guys that is kind of part of that group, and they've talked about it, and they brought in like this whole like video of all these clips and speaking about the people speaking how highly they think of him as a leader, as a teacher, how he holds his team to a high standard, but at the same time, like he's he's guy who's like a players coach who celebrates with his team, brings a lot of energy, and I think his team is really appreciated. So I think that part's really interesting. Him as maybe a future head coach in the NFL. He's already getting some interviews. So, that is something to think of. And then, again, this guy's more, he's kind of towards the middle in the NFL as far as a man guy. He's kind of in the middle. He runs a lot of man, a lot of zone, but doesn't really do much one way. As far as at least a percentage wise compared to the rest of the league, he is much heavier on zone, but that's pretty normal in the NFL. Nobody runs really more than like a 30% is about the highest people run for man. So, really, really interesting candidate without a doubt.
Yeah. So what's interesting about him is this is a guy who he played a lot of football. He was a Notre Dame grad, was a 2nd-round pick. He played defensive, and he's basically a defensive lineman. This is where he's different than the other guys. The other two guys are defensive backs, right? They're defensive back coaches, and they bring that perspective as defensive coordinators, which I think you see a lot of that influence, where like the entire defense is based on what the DBs are doing pre and post snap. With him, he does a lot of the same stuff, but his background is D-line. I went and watched a lot of film on him and watched breakdowns of how he runs his scheme and talk and some of the interviews with him and how he designs things. And his fundamental philosophy is very similar. Create confusion and chaos between pre and post snap reads for the quarterbacks, confuse them enough where you can get pressures. And he does bring pressure and blitzes. And the whole concept is do a lot of rotation of your linebackers and DBs to slow down the quarterback, confuse them, and then let the pressure get there. That's fundamentally what he's trying to do with it. A lot of these guys are trying to do. He does it out of a little bit of a different system. So different, than actually like to some extent, like what Shane Bowen would have done with a lot of these creeper type blitzes and things like that at times. But it's very different when you see it on the field because he will rely on the front to get there. He will have some blitzes. He'll do a lot of stunts and twists. But what he really starts with is a lot of single high safety looks. So it's either cover 1, cover 3, pre-snap a lot of the time. And then there's crazy rotations. I don't know if you've watched the film on him, but like you have linebackers or safeties, peppering the A gap, pre-snap, threatening blitz, and they're running back literally at the snap. They're flying backwards just before the snap and going back. And all of a sudden that cover 1 goes into cover 2. And before you know it, there's a middle of the field guy and it's Tampa 2. And so it quickly rotates into a lot of Tampa 2 or inverted Tampa 2 type coverages, but it's hard to tell which way he's going with his pre-snap looks. He moves these guys around a lot. Again, the concept is slow down the quarterback's eyes, slow down his processing, confuse him, and get pressure from the other quarterback. And I think there are elements of trying to get there. There's also a lot of his defense is based on you got to stop the run early, and then you create these kinds of chaos scenarios on passing downs, mainly because you want A, to not allow explosive plays, and B, you want to try to force turnovers. You want to get mistakes and turnovers. That's kind of the fundamental basic part of the defense. He's successful at it. I don't think he was as successful as he would have liked to have been in Miami. I know Javon Holland struggled with this defense. It requires a lot of movement. And I remember him talking about, man, that's a complicated defense. All three of these guys, especially Weaver, to run these defenses, you know what you need? You need great athletes at linebacker and safety. I mean, you need supreme athletes to play those positions. Your cornerbacks they don't have to be press man. They don't have to be like physical all the time. They do need to have their ability to keep their eyes on the quarterback and close on the football. That they need to have. But your safeties and your linebackers have to be extremely athletic to run these types of defenses. So if these are three of the top guys that John Harbaugh is looking at, I think that gives you a glimpse of the type of players we would be looking to acquire, either via free agency or the draft. Tyler Nubin is not a very athletic safety. I don't know how he fits in this. We'll see. Javon Holland is more athletic, and I think he does fit.
And he has a history with Weaver.
He has a history with Weaver. I think he fits naturally in what Leonard wants to do. Bobby Okereke is a good athlete. He's just, he's not great in coverage. But if you're not asking him to do pure coverage, if you're just asking him to use raw athleticism, right? Come downhill a lot, fly backwards, cover a Tampa type position as a linebacker, like just go kind of, move him around. I suspect he'll be okay in that role, because you're just tapping into his athleticism more than anything.
Yeah. From a guy that we really kind of just expected to be gone this offseason, I think Bobby Okereke with these type of defensive coordinators becomes much more likely.
Yeah. I mean, what's Okereke's cap at next year? Like 10 million or something like that?
I think it's like 12, but you only save 9. You still 9.
I'm sorry. He has a 14.6 cap it, 14.4 cap it, and you would save 9 if you got rid of him. You take a $5.5 million dead cap. So you're saving 9. It's not nothing, but again, for 1 year on the contract, if you're looking at defensive coordinators who need that kind of athletic, linebacker, and you're not necessarily asking him to do a ton in coverage, I guess it depends on how much you have to ask him to do in coverage. I think there's a role for him on this team with these guys. And I'm not so sure they're going to dump Bobby Okereke based on what I'm seeing here. So I think you need better athletes. That's the bottom line at these positions. So how does Paulson Adebo fit in this? Because he's not a great athlete. He's a very strong press man guy. They try to move, or do you hold on to him and just he's your press man guy? Well, how do you see some of these guys fitting?
I mean, I think when healthy, Paulson Adebo is a pretty good athlete, but I think it depends on the guy you bring in. I mean, they can't really move on from him right now. That's really not can't be really a talking point right now, but something in the future. But, I think when you look at a guy like Anthony Weaver, you see a guy who runs a little bit more of that, at least more of that press man. But when you look at a guy like Jim Leonhard, at least what he did in Wisconsin was very heavy in the zone, and that's not quite as good of a fit for Paulson Adebo. Granted, he's worked there in Vance Joseph, who had, top 3 in man coverage in the NFL this year. So, it depends how much he takes from that. I do think if we do run a lot of like press man, I think he's a good fit.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting. It's going to see how these guys fit in. I think Cordell Flott becomes for any one of these guys, he becomes a guy you kind of have to bring back because a lot of these are based on he's a good athlete, Cordell Flott, and he's a good guy for the role of like dropping back and clicking and closing and making plays on football, which is what a lot of these defenses depend on. I think he becomes even more important with the guys we're mentioning.
Yeah, I think those are the guys that are really interesting discussion. And we'll have to get more into it when we get official word and the coordinators. But Cordell Flott, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jermaine Illuminor, those are guys who are imperfect players, but very good players. I mean, how do the size measurements fit? And is Wan'Dale Robinson's limitations going to be an issue? Is Cordell Flott's weight and early inability to tackle in the run game going to be an issue? Is Jermaine Illuminor's athleticism going to be an issue? And those are the questions that we'll have to ask moving forward.
It's pretty cool to like be discussing this. I got to be honest, like just going over like the possibility coaches and how they might look at the roster and who they want to bring in. You're getting a glimpse of these guys, and I love going over this stuff because one thing I'm confident of with these three names, it's not going to look anything like Shane Bowen's defense. I mean, Shane Bowen's defense was stagnant. Guys stood still. It was tough to watch. I mean, there wasn't a ton of deception. It was all like very vanilla. None of these three guys, assuming it's one of them, is going to bring that kind of look. You are going to see chaos, guys running around. Not exactly what Wink Martindale did, but if you guys remember when Wink Martindale was DC, you would always see our safeties like running up to the A gap, running up to the line of scrimmage, and then dropping, and somebody else would drop back into coverage. It caused that split second of hesitation. It takes advantage of a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, the great ones they're just going to process that information really fast and find their read very quickly. Because you are going to leave somebody probably open. That's the reality with these defenses. But the vast majority of quarterbacks you're going to face are going to crumble, in the face of these kinds of defenses. And I think you're playing like the 80-20 rule with these guys. And I think that's going to add up to a lot of opportunities to win games next year. The same way Wink Martindale got us in those positions.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I'm excited to talk about it because I think, especially with these defensive guys, there's a true identity and a true prototype to look for. That's been kind of the fun of the show is when you can really get an idea of this is the type of guy who can fit this team and when we're looking for in draft and free agency. And, I feel like that's something that we've talked about with the Ravens for a long time. So like everyone's like, this is a Ravens pick. This is a Ravens guy. And I think we can finally sit there and be like, this is a Giants guy.
Yeah. But BPA and best athlete available a lot of times was the Ravens player, and I think you can start looking forward to guys like that in free agency and in the draft. So, anyway, that's a preview of some of the coaches that might be on the radar for the Giants. I mean, you want to talk about the assistant coaches a little bit? I mean, the whole D-line. I mean, I don't know who the D-line coach would be. I mean, it sounds like Andre Patterson's out. I mean, we were both fans of Andre Patterson, but I totally understand moving on from the defensive unit. You think there's anybody? What was that?
Bring in your own guys. I get it.
Yeah. On offense, we'll see who he retains and gets rid of. But again, I think all of us feel pretty strongly as a fan base that Carmen Brasillo, I mean, I think there's only one guy I would fire him for that's out there right now.
Yeah.
And I'm just not sure that we would have access to that guy. I mean, I guess we could if we really wanted him, but but like I think otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense to fire Carmen Brasillo. And by the way, the guy I'm talking about is Dwayne Ledford, who was fired by the Falcons earlier this week. Great O-line coach. But why did they fire him? Because they hired like one of the handful of people in the world who are better than him in Bill Callahan. So I get that. Ledford's out there. Somebody's going to get him. Wouldn't shock me if he ended up with the other Harbaugh, out in LA. But, but other than him, I would just prefer to keep Carmen Brasillo, and I hope he does.
Yeah, that's where I am, man. And to be honest, I do think Ledford's a better coach, but I also think there's an aspect where Carmen Brasillo hasn't gotten the investments that he can really work with. And I do think there's just an idea of trying to build some continuity on this line. So I have no issue with not messing with what we got going because I'm very comfortable and happy with what Carmen Brasillo has done. But yeah, man, I mean, in general, I think, you talked about defensive assistants getting fired. I think to me that signals he's probably going to bring in a lot of guys from Baltimore. I mean, this isn't a normal situation where it was like Brian Dable, came here and got a lot of guys from Buffalo, but at the same time, it was the only guys he was allowed to bring. And there is an idea like Baltimore can block guys, they have, but they're flipping the whole staff. You don't know who's going to stay. You don't know who's going to go. And, a lot of these guys, especially the assistants, are just going to.
I think part of the reason Baltimore is holding on to guys makes me feel, and something you suspected the whole time, that the guy they want to hire is Jesse Minter. And I think we've heard rumblings that it might be Jesse Minter out there and potentially appearing with a guy like Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator. But if they do bring in Minter, I imagine they're going to have a strong draw to keep a lot of their current coaches, to keep that continuity. So I'm not 100% certain we're going to get all of those coaches. I think it's more likely that if we hire a guy like Leonhard, we're going to be tapping into, guys he's comfortable with also. But we'll see. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. But I think that's it for the coaching preview and the discussion of the first week or so of this Harbaugh era. We should mention that, as a college football show, we just witnessed a great national title game on Monday night. Awesome game between Miami and Indiana. And of course, in the end, Curt Cignetti's team pulled it out. Magical season by Curt Cignetti in Indiana. I mean, national titles, undefeated. I can't imagine why any program that would have access to Curt Cignetti would not want to hire him as their head coach. It would be insane not to hire Curt Cignetti. Like, imagine being the school that he graduated from, knowing him, and not hiring him because, hey, Neil Brown needs another year. but
Fuck off, dude.
This is my forever torture for this West Virginia alum. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football, pound for pound. He might be the best coach in football, pound for pound.
He's the best coach in sports.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. So shout out to him and that Indiana team. No more college football till, much later in the year. We're done with our prospect reviews, position by position group. We're going to start doing stuff that's more individualized as we get towards the draft, like we did last year, picking a few players here and there, reviewing them. But what I'm thinking about doing, I'm discussing this with you in real time, is I think we should see who they hire as coaches and start really scouring the draft and our big boards as we create it to find the schematic fits that I think might match well with the guys they hire. So I think we might be focusing on that a little bit.
Yeah, especially when we start getting some testing numbers in here too, and try to get the right athletes and whatnot they look for. I have some numbers we'll go over in a little bit that I think will be interesting to get an idea. But I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, we're going to do a free agency preview at one point. I keep going to the draft, but we can start talking about who we think the Giants are going to get. What are our needs? What guys from Baltimore, what guys from heck, maybe Denver that we might want to bring over. I think that will be an interesting discussion, and I'm excited to see how it all plays out.
Before you guys leave us, once again, please, if you have not done so already, like the episode on YouTube, hit that like button down there. It helps us, and subscribe to He's a Giant on YouTube. It really helps us a lot. We appreciate you guys, and we're growing, and it's fun doing this stuff. If you enjoy what we bring, please hit that subscribe button. It raises our audience. You can always reach me, Monty, and our pod on Twitter. You can find us at He's a Giant Pod. You can reach me at Queens_guy, Monty at MONTECRI5TO. Next week, we'll probably start going over some of the hired coaches. And it's going to be a lot of fun to break down stuff, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. But unless you have any closing thoughts here, Monty, I think we should shut this one down.
I wanted to share some of those numbers that I said I drew up late before.
I'm sorry.
Trying to rush my numbers out. Yeah. So
I was too busy shit talking you about Curt Cignetti. I forgot all about it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So this is what I did. Sal got a lot of the coaching work in as far as reviewing a lot of these guys. I kind of stuck more to Leonhard and Monken. But I thought this would be interesting. And because we have a large sample size of John Harbaugh. We have 18 years of him over in Baltimore. And obviously, things will change. He's not Eric DeCosta. He's not Ozzie Newsome. He's his own person. But, this is who he's worked with. So this graph here essentially goes by position and goes by round and shows based off of all the players that were taken in that round, or how likely
they are to get taken at that position. So, you can look at here and we can, get some analysis to go away from. So like round one, for example, we can see that the most likely positions here, you can see safeties very high, you see corners very high, and you can see O-line as a whole is a very high one. And so on and so forth. I mean, you can there's some I think some fun trends to take away from here. Like cornerback and safeties haven't really been something that they've addressed in the second round. It's something that they've really done first or on other days. So, that's something to keep in mind. But they've been very heavy on linebackers. Linebackers is something that they've prioritized. About 26% of the time they're taking a linebacker in the second round. It's a pretty high number. You can look at round 3, the highest is D end, that is a very Ravens thing. It's not something you expect, because also 20% in round 2. I mean, they really prioritize the defensive line, especially the edge rushers on those days. And, as noted by really only one time they've taken a D end in round 1 with Owe. So that is really the prime spot where they target it, is trying to get it on day 2. Running back is something that they haven't done round 1 at all, keeping that in mind with Jeremiah Love, and they haven't done it in round 3 at all. So running back is something that they really don't take as often. Look at round 4, wide receiver 20% of the time, cornerback 20% of the time. That's something that they address there a lot. Haven't touched safeties there, haven't touched tackles there, and haven't touched defensive tackles there. Round 5, they haven't done wide receivers there at all. They haven't done safeties there at all. But you look, and they've done their O-line there a lot. The offensive tackles being 15% of that, cornerbacks 30%, and so on. So I mean, you can look here. Anybody's watching round 6 and 7, where there's a little bit less. But I don't know. What are some of your thoughts on this, Sal? Any takeaways you have?
No, I mean, I think the takeaway, you have to be careful with the round 1 interpretations, because the Ravens are never drafting at the top of the draft,
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of what they take in round 1 is based on, hey, we're drafting in the last 10 picks or last 12 picks, and who are the best players at those picks. And I think a lot of the first round positional value stuff goes out the window when you're in that point of the draft, right? You're just really looking for an impact player of any kind. When you get it, what's interesting is the day 2 stuff, right? Like that linebacker round 2 just is like a big red sign that's glaring out, that 26%. If you want an impact linebacker, and I think a lot of the defenses we're talking about rely on athletic impact linebackers, you got to take them on day 2. And you probably have to take them early. You're probably not going to take them day 1. You might, depending on where you draft, but really you're looking at a guy day 2 that you want to get those guys. So I think that's exactly where a lot of us think the Giants might target a linebacker is either in the second, or if we get a 3rd round pick in the 3rd round. But I suspect in the 2nd round, it's going to be right up there on preferential picks to make. You don't want to draft on need a position, but at the same time, like there's only so many high impact players by position group that are available, in each round. And I think that's a place where you might find somebody. It's interesting to me to see that O-line is, kind of spaced out, but they have a lot of round 5 swings on O-line. I think that is a product of, we have our starters, we go get veterans and guys we've developed already, and we just keep swinging and developing in the later rounds on the O-line. I think that's what that is. And that's a lot of that. Wide receiver is interesting. They swing early a lot. We know that. And then they don't swing all the way through until the end of the draft again.
Yeah, 4 and 7.
But it's arguably been their worst position, right? All these years been their wide receiver hit rate. So hard to make an analogy of it to the Giants, only because we're always drafting at the top of the draft and they're always drafting at the bottom of the draft. But you see some trends, and I think it's something to look out for. Do I think, looking at this, that, hey, offensive tackle, they're not going to take in the 1st round because of this? No, I think that's not, I don't buy that. Yeah. But it's something to pay attention to.
And I think I messed up with, I messed up my sorting here when I was trying to do it with my O-line and O tackle. So I'll have to get that fixed. I know Ronnie Stanley was taken in the first round, so that kind of got mixed up with into here. But regardless, I'll get that sorted out. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and I think the biggest takeaway for round one is to what you said is BPA. I know they pick later, but that's what they do. They try to get difference makers round one. They don't care as much about the position. So, but otherwise, yeah. I mean, look, again, it's not that this is how it will happen, but I do think that there is a takeaway here with 18 years of history with John Harbaugh. Like, I thought one that was interesting too is cornerback. It's cornerback's position that they have touched round one, but really they wait to day three otherwise at the start of day three. But that's their prime spot for going cornerback if they don't go day one. So keep an eye on that at the start of day three, especially with us not having our third round pick this year. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on this as something to consider as we're doing like our mock drafts and whatnot. But again, with such a large sample size, I thought it was just worth looking at.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. Well, thank you for doing that. And I think we're going to do a breakdown as we learn more stuff about how they're probably going to draft, but we'll see how it goes. All right. Can I close it out now?
Now you can close it out.
I can close it out. Thank you guys. Remember, hit the like button, subscribe at He's a Giant Pod, at Queens_guy, at MONTECRI5TO. We will see you next Wednesday where we go through the hired coaches, I presume, or at least some of them, and start breaking down what that's going to look like from a personnel standpoint. Thank you guys for being here. You guys have a great night. Go Giants.
The Harbaugh Era is here. Go Giants.